Hello, welcome. I'm Pauline from PQW and I'd love to welcome you to this workshop. We're going to have fun. It's a very relaxed class to do and it's all about hexagons and it's all quilt as you go. No hand stitching whatsoever. So you can see by this little piece that I've got here on the table that we've featured our fairy fabric. So you could feature anything here. If you're making it for a little boy, you could put trucks and cars. You could make it like an I Spy quilt. You could put animals. You could do all sorts of things. You know, if it's for a man, you might be able to put something, you know, if his favourite hobby is golfing or fishing or whatever, you could feature fabrics that have those sort of emblems on them. But it is so easy to do. I'm going to teach you how to cut out your fabric and your batting and talk about all the different things that we need to know. Then we're going to machine piece it together. And as we're machine piecing it, we're basically quilting it and it's completely done. You don't even have to put a binding on it. So now all the plain colours or the solid colours that are showing up, they're actually the fabrics that are on the back. So the back fabric gets turned to the front. So keep that in mind when you're choosing your fabrics. Find your feature fabric that you like for the front, whatever that may be, and we're going to fussy cut that out. So look at all the colours that are in the print that you're going to use and then choose fabrics. And it doesn't have to be solids. These could all be the one fabric. You know, you might be able to want to put a stripe on the back so that the stripe folds over to the front. You might want to have like print fabrics that go well with your feature fabric. So there's so many options with this quilt and you can make it as large or as small as you want it to be. So what we're going to use first up, we're going to use our nested hexagon tools. Now, some of you may own these, but if you don't, I really strongly suggest invest in these because they really work brilliantly. So there's all different sizes ranging from 1 inch right up to 4.5 inches. So if you're going to do English paper piecing with hexagons, you'd use the first 2 in the set. But for this class, we're going to use the outside 3. So we're going to pull these apart, and they do pull apart. So we've got all these different sizes. We'll put these ones aside and then we're going to get started. So we're going to start by cutting out our backing fabrics. So I'll just bring my cutting mat over here. So we'll use this little cutting mat. So what we're going to do is choose your fabrics for the back, whatever they may be. Put your fabric out on your cutting mat or whatever you use to cut with. We're going to use 2 of these templates together. So they sit inside each other. And what we're going to do, now you can use your rotary cutter and cut around here if you wish. But if you don't feel confident doing that, use your fabric marking pen and draw the line all the way around. Then once we've got that drawn around, we want to mark the inside as well because the inside line in here is going to be our stitching line. That's where we're going to stitch with the machine to join it all together. So there we have our 2 lines drawn. So now I would normally cut out around that with the rotary cutter, but we're only going to cut on the outside. We're not going to cut this piece, this middle piece out. Now, if you choose to draw the line, you can cut that out with scissors, but I find it's hard to get it all even. So I would suggest using the little 1-inch ruler, put this on your drawn line, and then cut with your little rotary cutter because that to me makes it so simple if you don't want to cut right at the edge of the template. So just cut all of this out all the way around. Now I'm not going to cut all the way around because I think you get the idea of it. So cut all the way around and then you're going to have your shapes cut out. So here we've got a pink one. cut out. Now on this one I haven't marked the inner line, which you know you don't have to do that at this stage as you're drawing around the template, but you would need to put these back on, nest them back in. The other option you have to draw that line, if you don't want to use a fabric marking pencil, use the Hera marker. This works wonderfully well. This puts a crease in your fabric. And it's best, I just used this rounded edge, which it's not marking properly, so try using the sharper edge. And that will put a crease all the way around for you. And I don't know whether you can pick that up, but I can quite clearly see that crease. So either mark with your fabric marking pencil or your Hera marker. So once you get them all marked up, we're then going to start joining them together. So now you would need to think about how you're going to position these colours. I've just got a couple of colours here cut out. But once you've got one row laid out, so we've got the colours here, you can see all the colours, we've just alternated them. Once you've got these done, don't worry about this side one at the moment, I'll talk to you about that as we go on. But once you've got one row, and think about how wide you want this project to be. You know, if you want to make it for a child's bed, just measure the bed up and see how many of these hexagons you'll need to go across the bed, and then of course you need to work out the length. So once you've got that done, I'm just going to put these back on and I'm going to mark these with my fabric marking pencil. But a little tip, which you may have picked up in some of my other classes that you've been watching, use the sandpaper, because I really don't want this to stretch. I want it to sit there beautifully. And if you notice before when I was drawing, my fabric stretched a little bit. But if I put it on the sandpaper and mark with my pencil or the Hera marker, my fabric doesn't stretch because the sandpaper holds the fabric and it doesn't go anywhere. If it stretches as you trace this shape around, your hexagons won't all fit together. They'll go all wonky on you, and you don't want that to happen. So if you don't have one of these workboards, but I strongly recommend if you want to invest in something good, these workboards are brilliant because they're your ironing mat, your cutting mat, your sandpaper mat. But if you don't want to invest in one of these, make sure you get a nice piece of sandpaper and put it on a solid board, so then you've got it when you need to mark out your things. Oops, I forgot one. Let's go back and just mark that. So there's one marked up. We'll mark the second one up. And then we'll be ready to start stitching. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, this method has been around for a long time, but most people hand stitch these together, where we're going to machine stitch them. That's exactly why we need to draw this line, because this line, as I said before, is going to be our stitching line. And when we go to the machine, you'll see how easy it is to put it together. So there's our second one marked up. So now what we're going to do is we need to pin these two together, measure them up, line them up so that they're all aligned up. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pin on both of these points here. So use whatever pins you like. I like to use the double fork pins because I know I can and put the pin, one prong of the pin through so it comes through at exactly the same point at the back. Just need to line that up so that we know we've got them level and pin. Do the same with the other side. Pop your pin in. Make sure you come out on the same mark at the back. Then what we're going to do is go to the machine and we're going to sew from that pin to that pin. But you'll need to start and do a couple of back stitches where you start and a couple of back stitches where you finish, because you don't want this to pop open. So once we stitch along there, we'll show you this piece that we've got joined up. So you can see that we've stitched from point to point, and then we've come through and we've joined this one point to point. So we make up a row like that. We've got 3 in this row, then we'll make up this row, and then we come back and we're going to join it here, which we'll go to the machine and we'll do this so that you can see what it's done. So we join here and make up one complete row. So you might have 20 of these hexagons going across to make up the size you want for the bed. So you join all of these together, then you'd come and you'd join your next row together. So you just make your rows up first. Then we're going to come back and join the rows together by stitching up and down. Such a simple, simple process. But before we go to the machine and set up there, I want to just go over cutting out your feature fabric. But we also need to cut out our wadding or our batting. Now, to get this to sit nice and flat, as you probably know if you've been watching all my other class videos, the only batting that I recommend and use, or some of us may call it wadding, I only use the Hobbs Heirloom double-sided fusible batting. Now, I use this because I can iron my layers together. I'm not going to get any movement. If I was using another batting to do this project, I would probably have to do a lot of pinning and I'd get a lot of movement and things wouldn't sit as flat as I would like them to do. So if you don't know about this, it's 80% cotton, 20% polyester. It's got a very, very light fuse on both sides, so it's double-sided fusible. Now, when we cut this out, and when we cut out our feature fabric, we're going to use the smaller hexagon. So we're going to be using the 3.5 inch hexagon. So you would find your feature fabric. Once again, go to your sandpaper. This is just such a sweet fabric. I've had this for so long. I brought this when my granddaughter was born and she's now 13 and I've just used it. But she'll still love these little fairies. So I'm going to feature this one here. So using these templates, it makes it fabulous because you can fussy cut. You can decide what part of that element of the design you want to feature in the middle of your hexagon. So I can just play with this, decide how I want to do it. Once I've decided on it, I then will just trace around that and we'll cut that out. So just do that, cut that out as we said before. You do the same with your batting, cut out as many of these as you need to build up your rows. Then once you've got that done, oops, we'll just pull this out. Once we've got one cut out, we'll then, as we see, we've got our batting cut, we've got our feature fabric cut. Just lay them together, put them onto your ironing surface, and with a hot, dry iron, just slowly press. Now, a lot of people get really worried at this stage when I do that because I've already told you that this is double-sided fusible. And you're probably thinking, well, what's going to happen to my ironing board cover? Nothing will happen because the fuse doesn't stick to this. And there's not enough heat going through to make the adhesive active. So it will never wreck your ironing board cover. If you're really worried, put a bit of baking paper and that down, but I never have to worry about it. It just sits there beautifully. So there's my feature fabric with the batting on it, ready to go. So we'll go to the sewing machine, we'll sew just a couple of these pieces together, then we'll come back and I'll explain what we do to join all of this together. So we're at the sewing machine now, but I just want to talk about the foot that I use and how else I set the machine up. We're just going to use a straight stitch, but I really recommend that we use the open toe foot. So this foot here has nothing in the front. Now, I find that's the best foot to use. We're not doing a 1/4 inch, we're actually stitching on a line. So we'll need to be able to see the line. So just have your needle in the centre position, put your open toe foot on. If you don't have one for your machine, I think it is the best investment you can make for your machine. Go to your dealer, and give them the brand and the model of your machine, and I'm sure they can help you out with an open toe foot. The other thing I have on my machine is the sew slip mat. I'm always have this on the bed of my machine because I find it just slides everything through beautifully for me, particularly when we start building this quilt together. You know, we're going to eventually have all the batting and the 2 layers together. I don't want to have to push it through my machine. I want it to glide through. So set your machine up, any thread that you like to use to sew with. Make sure you've got a good needle in your machine. You don't want to have skip stitches or tension issues, and a blunt needle can cause tension issues. So make sure your machine's ready to go. Put your mat on. If you've not got one of these or don't know about them, they have a tacky back to it. Now that back grabs to the bed of the machine. So once you put it on, you need your feed dogs exposed, which this mat does. Then pat the mat down because you don't want the mat to slide as you push your fabric through because you'd stitch through it. You don't want to do that. So now we've pinned this when we were at the cutting table before. We've put our pins in, so we're going to sew from pin to pin. Now I'm just going to put my needle down exactly where those 2 lines intersect. Oops, just line it up. Put my needle down and then I'll remove the pin because I don't want to sew over that pin. And if you don't use an awl, this is the best thing you can have at your sewing machine because it helps immensely to get things removed and helps work your fabric through. So I believe every sewing machine should come with one of these. I love them. It's called a tailor's awl if you have not got one. If you haven't got one, make sure you get one that's got the nice pointy edge on it. There's some that are quite round and thick, and I find they don't do the right job for me. So this one is the best. So we're just going to sew from point to point. Now you just need to do a couple of reverse stitches there because we want to ank that thread off. Come right across. When we get close to the other edge, we'll remove this pin. And I'm just going to use my awl to hold those 2 pieces together to where they should be matching. So right up to it, stop right at that point, reverse, just do a couple of stitches and we're done. So that's how easy it is to sew these pieces together. Now once we've got that done, we now need, and if this was a full row that I've made up, I'm now ready to start joining the rows together. So we'll just do a bit of pinning and getting this happening for you so you can see how this works. So I've already got these sections joined just like we've done before, and we've already inserted some of these, but I want to come now and insert these 2 that I've just done for you. This down. Now what we're going to do is we're going to join this section and this section and this section. So we'll just put them right sides together as we've done before. We're going to line up our drawn lines. As we can see here, we've got this line. We need to match these 2 exactly. So it's really just matching seam to seam. It is such a simple process. Pop your pin in. And you need to know that they're connecting perfectly there. We'll pop a pin in this side. And, you know, doing it this way and having that drawn line, everything should line up absolutely perfect for you. So we're now going to stitch from this point to this point. Once again, put your needle down. So I'm putting the needle down exactly where I stopped stitching before. Pull your pin out. Do those couple of back stitches. And we come right across to this side. We're getting up towards the pin now, so stop with your needle down, pull that pin out, put the awl so that I know that those 2 pieces are connecting perfect there, hold with the awl, So right up to that drawn line that we have, reverse, done. So there's just a little bit of stopping and pulling out from under the machine and pinning the next section together, but you know, you're joining your backing together. It's so easy to do. So now we come across and we're going to join, we'll pin from this point to this point. Just make sure this back piece is folded out. You can see where I've stopped stitching there. So we'll once again pin this point. And normally I wouldn't have the two same colours matching, but I've used up all the other fabric we used in the quilt, so we just have to make do with these. So now we sew from this point to this point. So I hope you're getting the idea of this, of how simple it is to do. Put your needle down, remove the pin, do your little back stitch, and you know you're going to sew straight because you've got a line to sew on, so hopefully you can sew on the line. Remove the pin, hold with the awl, couple of back stitches, done. So that's the way you go through and you join your rows together. It's such a simple process. If you've never tried it before, it's so worth it. So then that just fits into that piece absolutely perfect. So you can see how it's fitted in. It's not overridden anything because we know where we're going to stitch to. We're not sewing blind. And that's why it's a good idea to have that foot on the machine. So now I'm going to show you how to make the side pieces and how to start to put your little fussy cut pieces in and fold the back over to the front. So it's very easy steps from here on in. Okay, so now we've stitched those seams, and there is still one here to go, but you know how to do that. So you just keep continuing making your rows, joining your rows together. And it'll start to get quite large if it's going to be a big quilt, but it'll still be very manageable. Now what we need to do is press our seams. So we're just going to press our seams so we're sitting it out nice and flat. You know, obviously you'd be doing this on an ironing board, so you'd have a lot more room. And then just check the back that everything's fine on the back and give the back a good press, because you want it to sit really nice and flat, which it will. And it makes a gorgeous backing for a quilt. You know, these could be all different fabrics, all different styles, and it's a great way of using up your stash. So now what we need to do is we need to now put our feature print in here. So we've already ironed these onto our batting before, so you'll just decide which way you want your feature print sitting up. I'm going to put it this way. You'll notice this fits right inside that stitching line. Then if you just press that, just put plenty of heat onto it, because that other side of that batting, remember it's fusible batting, so it's going to adhere. But just get plenty of heat into it. Just move the iron slow so the heat penetrates right through. And there it is in place. Now, if I didn't use that batting, I'd have to do an awful lot of pinning with safety pins, and I'd run the risk of it all moving as I start to stitch. So now, this next step we take is we're going to fold the edge of this blue over to the stitching line. So the edge of that over to the stitching line, and we'll just press that with the iron. We'll go all the way around and do that. So we'll just fold over and press. So once again, a very, very easy step. Fold over again. And everything should turn out really accurate for you, because using those templates, it keeps everything in line to where it needs to be. So you go around and do all of those edges. Then we come back and we fold it over onto our feature fabric. Now at this stage, I use the Roxanne glue basted. And once again, I'm using this glue instead of having to, oops, it's all got tacky from using it earlier on. Use the glue because that way we don't have to have any pins in the road at all that are going to affect us as we sew. So just fold it over, and I always heat set this at this stage just to set the glue. And the little mini iron's fabulous for doing this, but you know, if you don't have one, just use your regular iron. More glue, fold over. So what we have to do here is make sure we get this mitre right. So I'm going to use my awl once again to get this to turn exactly to where I need it. So I want that to be a nice mitre. And after you've done a couple of these, you'll get very used to how it all sits together. So we just keep coming around, gluing and folding. So that's how you're going to put your inserts in all of these. It's such a simple procedure. I love it because you can really get some dramatic effects here. I just need to get that mitre right. Use the awl to get it over there perfect. So that's how simple it is, step by step, how to do all of that. So you can imagine as we put all of our different colours in, iron it in place, fold it to there, to the stitching line and then over. So you can now see how this is all coming together. So it's very important to think about your backing fabric, how and where you're going to use each colour. You know, so that when it turns over to the front, you've got a nice array of colour happening, like we have on our quilt here. We made sure that we didn't have, you know, two colours the same together on the back. And that's where it would go wrong here because I've got two pinks together. So, but maybe you're using the same colour on the back for each block, then you'd have the same colour turning to the front, which can be nice if you've got a really busy print here to have the same colour on the back of each block. So I hope you think that's really, really easy to do. Now I'm just going to continue doing this around, and then I want to show you how we put our insert pieces in the side. That's another very simple step to do. We'll just fold this over because once I show you how to do the next step of putting those little side pieces in, I'm going to go back to the machine and just show you how we stitch this all together. We'll just continue to fold this and press. You know, and I'd love for you when you make this to send us some photos of your finished project because we love to share out what everybody's doing in these lessons. And hopefully you get a beautiful quilt made using this technique and using up all your stash. You know, if you're like me, you're never going to get through it. So that's why I've decided it's time to make some scrappy quilts and get them all finished so that when it's time for me to leave this world, I haven't left a big stash behind. But I'm probably going to have to live to 200 or beyond that to get it all done. And I think a lot of my quilting friends will be exactly like that. So I'm just getting those mitres right. But you can appreciate gluing it is much more efficient because I'd be having so many pins in this that as I build it up, and I'm going to build all of these up. I would build all of these up and do all my folding and gluing before I go to the machine to start stitching. Now, to talk about our little side pieces, what we're going to do, we'll put this aside. You would choose your appropriate colour that you want for your sides. Now, it can be like ours. You could put all different backings on them, or once again, you could have all of these with the same backing. So just mix it up. So we're going to open out to our sandpaper board again. We're going to use the two largest templates. Once again, we'll draw around this. Now, when I draw around this, I don't need to draw all the way around. I'll just come down here about 1 inch on this sides. Down about 1 inch. Do the same on the inside. And I do hope you get yourself a sandpaper board because, boy, it makes a difference to accuracy. So there's our piece. Now, from this point here, this point down, we need to add 1 inch. So if you use this little ruler, you're going to get that exact measurement, or, you know, if you have a bigger ruler, use it. But I just find this is a very handy ruler. So that is going to be our side piece. So here we have it, drawn and cut out, exactly as I've just drawn here. So when we put this in, we put it in exactly the same way as we put all of the big hexagons together. So we'll come around to this side, and we need to put our side bits in before we do the folding back. You could have folded back some of the sides, but the side you've got to put the little pieces in. But if you want to have the zigzaggy effect all the way around, you don't have to put these side pieces in. So if you want it to look like, just shift these, if you want it to look like this edge all the way around, you wouldn't put these side pieces in. But I just want to show you how to do the side pieces. You can put the side pieces all the way around, so it becomes like a border. So there's no rules, you just make up what you want to be effective for you. So to put this in, we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to pin where our two lines meet. We'll pin there and pin there. Then we'll stitch that. Then we'll come back and we'll pin this side and stitch that. And that's as simple as it is. And then this edge here is the edge that's turned in over the outside. So you don't even have to do a binding. So it is such a simple step. So I'm just going to glue down a bit more of this, and then we're going to go to the machine, and I'm going to stitch around this one for you to show you how all the stitching is done. And once that stitching's done, your project is totally finished. It's quilted because as you've joined this together, if you want, you could come back and do some free motion quilting here. If it was a plain fabric, you could quilt all of this as you go. You could quilt these pieces before you actually put them in place. So there's no reason why you have to have a backing on when you're quilting. If you wanted to, I could take this to the machine and I could free motion quilt around these shapes before I actually glue it into my backing fabric. So there's no rules, you just make up what is going to suit with you. But let's take you to the machine and I'll stitch around here to give you the whole process of how it's all stitched down. Okay, so now we're ready to sew this around. We're just going to sew around this one, but you know that you'd fold them all back, and I've completed folding this pink one back. You can see that could be the outside edge. This green would fold back onto the next one if I had that in place. Then I end up with this nice little scalloped, well, it's not a scalloped, it's a diagonal edge on my quilt, which is very, very pretty. And I've still got the open toe foot on the machine, and I've just got a nice fine cream thread, or you could use whatever colour thread you want. You know, if you've got a machine that does really fancy embroidery stitches, you could do an embroidery stitch along this edge of this, which would come through to the back, which would look fantastic also. But I'm just going to use my normal cream thread, and I'm going to put the edge of the foot, let's get this thread out of the road, the edge of the foot right on the edge of this blue fabric. And then I'm going to move my needle over, whoops, just need to lift that needle up high. I'm going to move the needle over so the needle sits right on the inside edge of the blue, because I want to stitch really close to this edge. So we'll just line that up and see how we go. Right, we're right on the edge. So now as I sew, I'm not going to watch my needle, I'm going to watch the inside edge of that foot so that I stay right on the edge of this blue. So off we go. So that sits right in close. Now the foot can start lifting up that edge, so use your awl. I always say use an awl all the time at your sewing machine. So we get to the point here, we now will put our needle in the down position, oops, and we'll pivot. And that's as simple as it is to do all your sewing. As I said, there's nothing hard about using this technique. It's a very easy technique, very simple to do. Just take your time. Join your backs together one day and then next day go and sit and join your little fussy cut prints in. And you can see now how we're stitching around this edge. If I used a blending thread or the monopoly clear thread, which I use a lot, I wouldn't see the stitching. But you can appreciate if you did a nice fancy stitch around the edge. You could even do a blanket stitch. If your machine does a blanket stitch, you could do a nice blanket stitch around the edge. So that's all there is to the process of doing your Hexagons Quilt As You Go. No hand stitching in the Hexagons whatsoever. But, you know, if you're a hand stitcher and you don't like stitching on your machine, there's no reason why you can't just hand stitch all of these edges down. It will take you quite some time, but it'll be enjoyable. I just don't have time for hand stitching, so that's why I do it all by machine. So I hope you've enjoyed the class. I've certainly enjoyed putting this together for you, but don't forget, look at all the other videos that we have as classes and join in the fun so that you can learn as much as you possibly can. Remember, I want to see photos of your quilts when it's finished. So for now, I thank you for joining us for this class, and until next time, happy stitching.